Welcome to Back on the Stack, a cEDH channel. If you would like to both support us and have the coolest shirt in town, check out our Bonfire site to get loads of Back on the Stack wearables. We'll drop the link in the description. As soon as we got news about a secret lair drop featuring brand new commanders from the Marvel Universe, we started brewing cEDH lists for them, and I think everyone is happy with the builds. Now, let's get right into it and see what decks are being piloted tonight.
What is going on, guys? Spuki here, piloting Storm tonight. This is a list that looks to execute a high storm count into sort of like an Eldritch Evolution like spell in order to get a pretty easy creature combo onto the field to win the game via an infinite storm and finding a spell seeker to find Grape Shot and Grape Shotting the table. That is the normal win condition in this deck, but let's check out the hand we've got. I had the mold of 4, so that's a little unfortunate. But we've got a little bit of mana, we have a finale, we'll see where this takes us, hopefully it takes us far. Let's check it out.
Tonight I'm piloting Wolverine, best there is. This is a classic Gruul Beats deck that can also win through either Kiki-Jiki or Dualcaster Mage combos. I kept second 7 for the obvious reason of being able to get out a turn 1 Minskaboo. Having some early card draw on these colors is key to gaining advantage. Plus, having Kiki-Jiki in hand already, I'm hoping to get into a creature tutor to get Hyrax Tower Scout to make infinite attackers.
Hi, my name's Corbin, I'm playing Black Panther this week. The reason I kept this hand is because of the ramp already in hand between Avacyn Pilgrim and Sol Ring, as well as the early game interaction of the Blind Obedience and the Solitude, and then the Emil the Blessed already in hand as a combo piece. I figured this hand was a good keeper.
Hey guys, John here. Today I'm going to be piloting Iron Man, Titan of Innovation, an artifact birthing pod creature that we're looking to use to assemble a Sensei's Divining Top combo. We've got a turn 2 Iron Man with this hand, as well as a Mystic Remora and a Ragavan to back it up. So let's get to it and see how it goes.
With introductions out of the way, Spuki will start us off. But first, J-Rock has a pregame action and puts Gemstone Caverns into play, exiling Rainthrough. Spuki draws and plays Breeding Pool for turn, shocking it in. He casts Mana Vault. He passes. J-Rock draws and casts Lotus Petal. He plays Ancient Tomb for turn. He casts Minsk and Boo, Timeless Heroes. It ETBs and he creates a Boo token. He activates the +1 ability of Minsk and puts 3 +1/+1 counters on Boo. He passes the turn. Corbin draws and plays Flooded Strand for turn. He pays a life, sacks it, and fetches up Savannah to the battlefield. He casts Avacyn's Pilgrim. He passes. John draws and plays Urza's Saga for turn. It ETBs and he adds a lore counter. He exiles Simian Spirit Guide from his hand at 1 red and uses it to help dash in Ragavan. He moves to combat and swings Ragavan at Spuki. Ragavan triggers on damage, John creates a treasure token, and Spuki exiles the top card of his library, which is a mystical tuner. John then moves through phases and passes the turn. Spuki draws and plays Mana Confluence for turn. He casts Arcane Signet. He casts Carpet of Flowers. He moves through phases and passes. J-Rock draws and plays Taiga for turn. He casts Allosaurus Shepherd. He moves to combat and swings Boo at Spuki. He declares no blocks and takes 4 damage. In his second main phase, he activates Mint's Neg2 ability, sacrificing Boo and doing 4 damage to Avacyn's Pilgrim. He then draws 4 cards. He casts Arbor Elf. He moves through phases and passes the turn. Corbin draws and plays Snow-Covered Plains for turn. He casts Sol Ring. He casts Blind Obedience. He passes the turn. John draws and adds a lore counter to Urza's Saga. He plays a basic island for turn. He casts Mystic Remora. He moves through phases and passes. Spuki draws and in his first main phase he adds 1 red through Carpet of Flowers. He uses it to help cast his commander, Storm, Force of Nature. He plays Wooded Foothills for turn. He passes. In his upkeep, J-Rock creates a tapped Boo token. He draws and plays Wandering Archaic. He activates Mink's +1 ability, putting 3 +1/+1 counters on Boo. He moves through phases and passes. Corbin draws, moves through phases, and attempts to pass, but in response, John cracks his treasure to help cast a mini Cyclonic Rift, targeting Blind Obedience. Wandering Archaic triggers and J-Rock copies Cyc Rift and bounces Mystic Remora. Then, the turn moves to John. John draws and Urza's Saga gets a 3rd lore counter. He taps it to float 1 colorless, sacrifices it, and attempts to fetch for an artifact with mana value 0 or 1. However, in response, Corbin flashes in Avid Mind Sensor. In response, Spuki pays a life, sacks his Wooded Foothills, and fetches up Stomping Grounds onto the battlefield tapped. Then, John looks at the top 4 cards of his library, failing to find. He casts Mana Vault. He plays a basic mountain for turn. He casts his commander, Iron Man, Titan of Innovation. He moves to combat and declares Iron Man at Minsk and Boo. Iron Man triggers on attack and he creates a treasure token. He sacrifices his mana vault and searches the top 4 cards of his library for an artifact with mana value 2. He finds and puts into play Izzet Signet, tapped. Then Iron Man deals lethal damage to Minsc and Boo. In his second main phase, John recasts Mystic Remora. He then passes. Spuki draws and instantly moves to combat, declaring Storm at J-Rock. He takes the damage. Spuki moves through phases and passes the turn. J-Rock draws and plays City of Brass for turn. He casts his commander, Wolverine, best there is. He casts Jessica's Will, choosing both modes and targeting Corbin. Fish triggers and John draws. Then J-Will resolves, he adds 5 red mana to his pool and exiles the top 3 cards, which were Flare of Duplication, Reflecting Pool, and Eternal Witness. He uses all floating red to cast Kiki Jiki, Mirror Breaker. He moves to combat and declares Wandering Archaic and Boo at Spuki. He declares no blocks and takes 8. J-Rock moves through phases, exiles the 3 J-Will cards, and passes the turn. Corbin draws and plays Blind Obedience again. Fish triggers and John draws. Corbin casts Sanctum Weaver. He passes. In his upkeep, John casts Rapid Hybridization, targeting Aven Mind Sensor. It resolves and Corbin creates a 3/3 Frizzard creature. Still in upkeep, John pays for Fish. He draws and plays Scalding Tarn for turn. He pays a life, sacks it, and fetches up Volcanic Island to the battlefield. He moves to combat and declares Iron Man at J-Rock. Iron Man triggers on attack and he creates a treasure token. He sacrifices it right away to Iron Man's ability and searches his deck for an artifact with CMC 1. He finds and puts into play Sensei's Divaning Top. Then J-Rock takes 4 damage. In his second main phase, John casts Grafdigger's Cage. He casts Ragavan. He moves through phases and passes the turn. Spuki draws and instantly moves to combat. He swings Storm at J-Rock again. He takes the damage. Spuki moves through phases and passes the turn. J-Rock draws and casts Cosmic Hunger, targeting Wolverine to deal damage to Iron Man. Fish triggers and John draws. Then Iron Man is destroyed. J-Rock casts Sylvala, Heart of the Wilds. He moves to combat and swings Wolverine, Wandering Archaic, and Boo all at John. J-Rock moves through phases and passes the turn. Corbin draws and plays Ranger Captain of Eos. It ETBs and he fetches Esper Sentinel to hand. He casts the Esper. He moves through phases and passes. In his upkeep, John pays for Fish. He draws and plays Ancient Tomb for land. He casts Treasure Nabber. He passes. Spuki draws and instantly moves to combat. He sends Storm at John. He takes the damage. Spuki moves through phases and passes the turn. J-Rock draws and instantly moves to combat. He declares Boo, Wandering Archaic, Wolverine, and Arbor Elf all at John. John declares Ragavan as a blocker on Wolverine, and in response, J-Rock casts Embiggen, targeting Wolverine and giving him +5/+5 until the end of turn. Fish and Esper both trigger, John draws, and J-Rock pays for Esper. Still in response, J-Rock taps Sylvala, adding 7 green mana. He uses it to activate Allosaurus Shepherd, making Arbor Elf a 5/5 dinosaur until the end of turn. Then, damage is assigned. Ragavan is destroyed, and John takes 13 damage. J-Rock then passes the turn. Corbin draws and plays Lush Portico for turn. It ETBs and he surveils, leaving it on top. He casts Runic Armasaur. He moves to combat and swings his 3/3 Frog Lizard token and Ranger Captain both at J-Rock. He declares no blocks and takes 6 damage. He attempts to move to his end step, and in response, John spins his Sensei's Top, looking at the top 3 cards and putting them back in any order. Then, the turn moves to John. In his upkeep, John sacrifices Fish. He draws and plays Riverglide Pathway for turn. He recasts his commander, Iron Man. He moves through phases and passes. Spuki draws and plays Scalding Tarn for turn. He moves to combat and swings Storm at J-Rock. He takes the damage. Spuki moves through phases and passes. J-Rock draws and instantly moves to combat. He declares Boo, Wandering Archaic, and Wolverine all at John. He declares no blocks and takes lethal damage. In his second main phase, J-Rock taps Sylvala, adding 4 green to his pool. He uses it to help cast Finale of Devastation, where X equals 3. Esper triggers and Corbin draws. It resolves and he tutors Hyrax Tire Scout to the battlefield. It ETBs and he untaps Sylvala. He casts Arcane Signet. He passes. Corbin draws and plays a basic Plains for turn. He casts Toski, Bearer of Secrets, extorting it through Blind Obedience. He moves to combat and swings both Ranger Captain and the 3/3 token at J-Rock. He declares Allosaurus Shepherd and Arbor Elf both as blockers. They both die to combat damage, and J-Rock takes none. Corbin then attempts to move through phases, and in response, Spuki pays a life, sacks his Scalding Tarn, and fetches up Steam Vents to the battlefield tapped. The turn then moves to Spuki. Spuki draws and casts Spellseeker. It ETBs and he tutors Brain Freeze to hand. He moves to combat and swings Storm at J-Rock. He takes 3 damage. In his second main phase, Spuki casts Neoform, sacrificing Spellseeker as an additional cost. Storm triggers and he gets 2 copies on the stack. Esper triggers and Corbin draws. Wandering Archaic triggers and J-Rock copies it, tutoring Kona, Rescue Beastie, to the battlefield. Then, Spuki tutors both Stormkiln Artist and Archmage Emeritus to the battlefield. He moves through phases and passes. J-Rock draws and plays a basic forest for turn. He moves to combat and swings Wolverine, Wandering Archaic, Boo, Kona, and Hyrix Tire Scout all at Spuki. Spuki blocks Hyrix with Storm. Hyrix is destroyed and Spuki takes 16 damage. He moves through phases and passes the turn. Corbin draws and plays Windswept Heath for turn. He pays a life, sacks it, fetches up Temple Garden out of the battlefield, shocking it in. He casts Emil the Blessed, extorting it through blind obedience. In response, Spuki casts March of Swirling Mist, exiling Brain Freeze as an additional cost, targeting Ranger Captain and the 3/3 token. Esper, Wandering Archaic, Stormkiln, and Archmage all trigger. Corbin draws through Esper, J-Rock copies March, targeting Runic Armasaur and Toski. Spuki then creates a treasure token through Stormkiln and draws a card through Archmage. Then, March resolves and phases out all 4 targets. Then, Emil resolves. Corbin casts Finale of Devastation, where X equals 1, extorting it through blind obedience. Wandering Archaic triggers and J-Rock copies it, tutoring Birds of Paradise to the battlefield. Then, the original resolves and Corbin also tutors Birds of Paradise to the battlefield. Then, he passes his turn. In his upkeep, Spuki pays 4 mana into Mana Vault to untap it. He draws and moves to combat, swinging Storm at Corbin. He takes the damage. In his second main phase, he casts Grape Shot, targeting Esper Sentinel. Esper, Wandering Archaic, Stormkiln Artist, and Archmage all trigger. Corbin draws through Esper. J-Rock copies Grape Shot, targeting Corbin's Birds of Paradise. Spuki creates a treasure through Stormkiln and then draws through Archmage. Then, the original copy resolves and deals lethal damage to Esper Sentinel. He then moves through phases and passes. J-Rock draws and casts Springleaf Drum. He moves to combat and swings Wolverine, Wandering Archaic, Boo, and Kona all at Corbin. He declares no blocks and takes 17 damage. He passes. Corbin draws and instantly goes to combat, swinging at J-Rock. Seeing the writing on the wall, Spuki makes a deal with J-Rock to end the game without giving Corbin the satisfaction of killing either of them. So, in response, Spuki taps his Mana Confluence, taking 1 damage for lethal. Then, J-Rock taps his Ancient Tomb, taking 2 damage for lethal. They are both eliminated, and Corbin wins the game. Well, not your typical combo finish to a competitive game, but sometimes that's just how it is. We hope that we inspired you to brew your own Marvel Commanders and find a way to break them. Congrats to Corbin for his win. As always, it was a blast to jam some games. Check out our deck links listed below, and we will see you back on the stack.
I don't know if pressuring John's life total even does anything.
My life,
Oh.
my life total.
You should.
Dude, I'm
You
at
should
negative
pressure John.
5. Just know that
Uh,
when you say swing all out at John, and John's been dead for the past hour, you are gonna get some comments.
that might be the blooper reel. We'll see.